Today we are talking about the secret God banned from the Bible as we explore a banned Gnostic text called the Tripartite Tractate that explores the birth and the origin of all reality from the highest God, the truest God, the secret God, and explains our divine origin. And of course, the church is not too happy with this sort of narrative. They would rather us look at ourselves as dirty, flawed, sinful beings, a creation from a lesser divinity, the God of the Bible. But today we're taking a look at the secret God that was banned, and it is our divine origin and our essence as we take a look at Valentinian Gnosticism as well. And this is going to be very interesting because normally we read a lot of Gnostic texts on my channel and from various different traditions, but largely it's from something called Sethian Gnosticism. And today we're starting a text that is associated with Valentinianism or Valentinian Gnosticism, which is a little different, but in a very interesting way. And I'm going to explain exactly what this is and what it has to do with the origin of us, the origin of reality, and the secret highest God. So let's begin. It's going to be good. Before we do, as always, please like and subscribe. Help spread this information. Help the algorithm push this to more people so more people can see this stuff. Also, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It is the best way to support my work, and you get access to members-only videos every single week and all our members-only videos. And you also, or you can get that by any tier on Patreon or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. Also, beware, in the comments, there are scammers. There are people pretending to be me, saying to join my WhatsApp, to join my Telegram. I don't have any of those things, so that's not me. Don't fall for it. Also, there are people and groups out there who don't like what I'm doing, who don't like what we're doing, and are spreading a lot of misinformation and disinformation about me and what we do. So just be on the lookout. Use logic and reason. Don't fall for any of the BS. Here we go, my friends. The secret God banned from the Bible, the Tripartite Tractate. Now, this is, I want to mention real quick that we are going to be reading from the Tripartite Tractate itself. Let me bring this up so you can see here. And for everyone who wants to know, you can read all of these Gnostic texts for free on gnosis.org. All right, so these were texts that were buried near the tombs of ancient Egypt that were discovered in 1945, I believe. So what is this? The Tripartite Tractate begins with describing this highest God, the supreme God, the God above all gods that is much higher than the God described in the Bible. So this is before the creation of the world. This is before the creation of the God of the Bible. So this takes place much before what's described in the Bible. Now, I mentioned there's a difference between Valentinian Gnosticism and Sethian Gnosticism, and I'll give you a very brief, we'll talk about it more as we go on, but very, very briefly, Sethian Gnosticism was very antithetical to Christianity. Valentinian Gnosticism still is, but it incorporates more Orthodox Christian elements into it. And in my opinion, what ends up happening or becoming of it, there's some good things about it and some bad things about it. The more negative aspects of it is that, in my opinion, when reading it, there's less of an emphasis on the role of women. Women still play a very powerful role in Valentinian Gnosticism, especially with Sophia. But it's a lot less. In Sethian Gnosticism, you have, the powerful figures of Norea and Barbelo and Eve and all these figures. And Valentinian Gnosticism, you still have it, but it's not as prevalent. But one of the main features that is very, very interesting is how they deal with the creator God of the world, the God found in the Bible. So according to the Sethian Gnostics, the God in the Bible is an evil, malicious being and is trapping souls in bodies to power them like batteries, and is creating humanity as slaves, and in the end will be destroyed and obliterated. Now, interestingly, in Valentinian Gnosticism, in some of them, not all, but in some, the creator God isn't necessarily looked at as evil, but more ignorant. And so it still does things that end up being pretty bad, but does so more in ignorance than direct malicious intent. And in some versions of Valentinian Gnosticism, the creator god, the demiurge, is actually redeemed and becomes good and a servant of the higher powers. Now, I actually kind of like this, and let me tell you why I like this, and then we'll get into this, because this is really good and we need to talk about this. But I want to give you, because we've never talked about Valentinian Gnosticism before, so I want to kind of give some pros and cons about it. I kind of like the idea of the demiurge, the creator god, demiurgos, being a figure that is redeemed and becomes good and the servant of the higher powers. I kind of like that idea. Because, you know, for the Sethian Gnostics, he's absolutely evil. The world is evil. He must be destroyed, and we must ascend to the realms of light, which is cool. But I like the idea of, because the idea of creating a dream world isn't necessarily a bad thing. So ultimately, what we want to do is harness the creative powers, so that we can create the world in the way which we desire. And also, if one looks at the demiurge as being symbolic of the ego, which a lot of people do, so destroying the ego would be like reaching a transcendent realm. But in Valentinian Gnosticism, it's not so much that the ego is destroyed, but it's realized, it's transcended, and then the ego becomes a servant of the higher powers, which is much more in line with a well-integrated psyche, where the ego is the servant of the higher self. So there's a lot of talk about destroying the ego and things like that. One shouldn't destroy the ego. The ego is a powerful tool, but the ego should be overcome and then used as a tool rather than identify with it. That's the difference. So the idea of the demiurge becoming good and a servant of the higher powers is very symbolically satisfying in terms of Jungian psychology, as viewing the demiurge as the ego, because when one overcomes the ego, you realize that, oh, I am not the ego, but the ego is still a tool that I need to use to get around and interact in the world. And so it becomes a servant of the higher self. And I like that. So some good things and bad things about Valentinianism. We'll explore all these ideas more in detail as we go through the ideas of Valentinianism. And we might even take a look at some of their rituals and things like this. Some individuals, I forget who it was, gave me the idea to do that in the chat, in the stream before this. But let's start right away here. So Part 1, Introduction. As for what we can say about the things that are exalted, what is fitting is that we begin with the Father, who is the root of the totality, the one from whom we have received grace to speak about him. So where are they going to begin? With explaining all things that they're going to be discussing. They're going to begin with the Father, the root of the totality. So, what is the Father? The Father is the root of the totality. What is the totality? The totality. Everything. The totality is everything. The Father is the root, or the source of everything. So where are we going to begin? The source of everything, which they are calling the Father. It says, he existed before anything other than himself came into being. The Father is okay, so important. He existed before anything other than himself came into being. The Father is a single one, like a number, for he is the first one and the one who is only himself. And see, this is also very, very cool, because now this is starting to hint at mathematics playing a role in reality. Not explicitly, but it's implicitly there, how they're talking about the Father being a single one, like a number. And this is very, very reflective of the Pythagorean idea of reality emanating numerically from the one in their symbol of the tetractys. And wow, what's with all the tripartite, tractate, the tetractys? What is this, a tongue twister for these people? It's not easy to say. Try it. But anyway, it reflects the idea, the Pythagorean idea of reality emanating from a one numerically, mathematically, and giving birth to a mathematical reality. This is also discussed in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where it talks about the one true God saying, I am one, seeing myself divided. This is myself in diversity. These are my this is my coming to be, something along these lines. So it's very cool, very reflective of ultimate reality being confined to a one, like a number. He is the first one and the one who is only himself. Yet he is not like a solitary individual. Otherwise, how could he be a father? For whenever there is a father, the name son follows. So you can really see how the Valentinian Gnosticism, and really Gnosticism in general, is a lot more philosophical, where they're exploring these ideas and these unfoldments as a series of principles and logical consequences, rather than just going, oh, in the beginning there was God, and he said, let there be light. Then he created the world. Then there were a lot of animals. Then there's a mean old snake. And the snake said, it's rather than just giving stories, it's a logical unfoldment wrapped up in these stories. So it's saying that, so in the beginning, there was just the single father, like a number, for he's one and the one who is only himself, but he's not like a solitary individual. Otherwise, how could there be a father? For whenever there is a father, the name son follows. So he's a single one, but and what does a father do? A father begets a son. Now, of course, you need a mother, etc. And this is where, in Sethian Gnosticism, the one gives rise to the mother, Barbelo, and it's through the father and the mother's interaction that the son is begotten, from the interaction of these two. But the important thing to talk about here is they're saying that the one is the only thing that exists, and everything else that exists comes from the one. So basically meaning that there will be more things. It's not like just the one exists and that's it, but there will be other things, but all these other things come from that one. So they're not separate and apart from the one. And in Sethian Gnosticism, this is called the Great Invisible Spirit, and it's sometimes called, I believe, the Virgin Spirit. And some people are like, well, why is it called the Virgin Spirit? And it's because this is a being that creates or gives birth to things, but it doesn't need something other than itself to give birth. It's from its own properties that it gives birth to other things. And so it's from its own so that's why it's called a virgin, because it doesn't need to have interaction or intercourse with something other than itself. Now, of course, there is, like I said, there is the mother, but the mother is part of the father. It's another aspect of the father or the one. So it says, but the single one who alone is the father. By the way, for those who are familiar with the Neogenian system of meta-rationalism, you'll notice a very, very big similarity where they are rooting reality in a single one and are exploring the properties of a single one. Our idea is rooted in the triple concept of one, infinity, and zero, which is what we call a zeta. It's a triple concept, one, infinity, and zero, being that all reality is infinite energy that balanced to zero in a single system, and then this one system that balances to zero with infinite energy can express itself in a multiplicity of ways. So just kind of another cool comparison as we look at the comparisons to like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Sethian Gnosticism and other similar systems. So it says, but the single one who alone is the father is like a root with tree branches and fruit. It is said of him that he is father in the proper sense, since he is imitable and immutable. Because of this, he is a single in the proper sense and is a God, because no one is a God for him, nor is anyone a father to him. So you have this one, and they're comparing it to a root, and with the tree and the branches and the fruit. So it is the source of all things, and like roots, it is the nourishment of all things as well. So this idea of a tree is very apt, even more so than a root. Like you can think of it like the seed as well. The seed contains the potentiality for the tree within it. Which is such a cool thing. I mean, have you ever really thought about that before? That you have this seed that is like a system, that is a system of information, of living information that contains the code to give birth to this huge, brilliant, complex organism. Isn't it? It's so fascinating. We get so used to these things because we're around them every day, but you have these little kernels of information, little kernels of code, living data sets that give birth to such beautiful complexity in life. So cool. So basically that's what they're saying that the single one is like. It's like a seed that contains within itself all the information from to give birth to existence. Now, like a seed though, a seed requires the environment. A seed requires the right soil, it requires moisture. Ultimately, the tree is going to need nutrients and things like this. Whereas the single one is a little different. It's like a seed that doesn't rely on any external environment. Everything is contained within itself that it needs. Everything within itself is contained. For he is... no one is a God for him, nor is anyone a father to him. So they're saying that this is the root of everything. This is the one true God. Oh, by the way, this is also very similar to Kabbalah, which is Ein Sof, the endless one. For he is unbegotten, and there is no one who begot him, nor another who created him. For whoever is someone's father, or his creator, he too has a father and creator. It is certainly possible for him to be father and creator of the one who came into being from him and the one whom he created. For he is not a father in the proper sense, nor a God, because he has someone who begot him and who created him. It is then only the Father and God in the proper sense that no one else begot. As for the totalities, he is the one who begot them and created them. He is without beginning and without end. So, they're emphasizing it again and again. They're just trying to pound it into the reader's head. Hey, this is the root of everything. This is the father of all things. It has no creator. It can create things itself and be the father of other things, but there's nothing above it. And it's responsible for all reality, the totality, and it is without beginning and it is without end. It is infinite, endless, one, with no creator, no external reliance that gives rise to all things and all reality. This underlying, ultimate, foundational principle and ground of existence. Not only is he without end, he is immortal for this reason, that he is unbegotten. And this is very, very cool, that it's this idea of he's immortal and unbegotten. So unbegotten, he wasn't born, he wasn't created, and he is without end and immortal. And so what this is where we can understand, because like in our system, what would we recognize this as? Well, we recognize this as energy. Energy cannot be created, it can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. So what's really being described here is a system of energy, because a system of energy is something that isn't created, it isn't destroyed, and it only transforms. So from energy, you can have energy transform into all reality, all existence, all complexity. And how is it possible that this energy exists in the first place? Well, in our system, this is because this energy balances to zero. And because it balances to zero, it's perfectly balanced. And logically and mathematically, you can have the existence of a perfectly balanced system. You can have the existence of a system of zero, of nothingness. There's nothing illogical about that. It's totally mathematically, logically consistent and sound. So if you believe that this is a rational reality, and when I say rational reality, I mean if you believe that ultimately all things have an explanation for why they are the way they are, if you believe that that is true, then you can know that what is logically possible can be, as long as it's compatible with all other things and everything is necessary for its existence. All the sufficient conditions are there for it to exist. But if you have all the proper sufficient conditions, then it can exist. And the sufficient conditions for a zero entity, an entity of infinite energy, is possible. And so it exists. And so anyway, what's really being described here in the way they're talking about it is a system of energy, something that is above all things. It can't be created, it can't be destroyed, but it has very diverse transformations. So it's really cool to see these ideas that we are familiar with today being talked about in these senses here. So not only is he without end, he is immortal for this reason, that he is unbegotten, but he is also invariable in his eternal existence, in his identity, in that by which he is established, and in that by which he is great. Neither will he remove himself from that by which he is, nor will anyone else force him to produce an end with which he has not ever desired. He has not had anyone who initiated his own existence. Thus he himself, unchanged, and no one else can remove him from his existence and his identity, that in which he is and his greatness, so that he cannot be grasped, nor it is possible for anyone else to change him into a different form, or to reduce him, or alter him, or diminish him, since this is the fullest sense of the truth, who is the unalterable, immutable one with immutability clothing him. So again, very, very cool. If you can see what's going on here, is essentially this is philosophy. This is philosophy happening here. This is metaphysics going on, trying to explain reality from first principles, from a ground, and it's doing so in what will eventually be a Christian story, a Christian mythos that people are familiar with. But basically, you're talking about here a principle of existence, and it is the highest principle, the most powerful principle, and they're just reiterating it again and again and explaining it in different ways that no one can remove it from existence, and you can't change it. No thing can change it into a different form, or reduce it, or alter it, or diminish it, since he is the fullest sense of truth, who is the unalterable, immutable one with immutability clothing him. Okay, so I want to make a quick distinction. I'm always torn between like how much detail do I want to get into, because sometimes it takes so long to explain some of these concepts, and I want to get through what we want to read because there's so many interesting things. But I just want to make clarification, because we're talking about energy. We're talking about energy that cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed. And I just want to mention here, well, what does it mean by, well, it's unalterable? You can't alter it. But see, it's unalterable, immutable. It cannot be diminished. It's the fullest sense of the truth. So when we understand this thing that they're talking about here to be the source of all existence, we can consider it to be the ground of all existence. And when one considers the ground of all existence, this is how change comes from something that is unchanging, so to speak. So at the base, at the very base, the foundation of all existence, the bare essence of existence, the purest form of the one, yes, it is unchangeable, but it gives rise to various transformations and changes. And a great way to understand this is the difference between a piano and a song that a piano produces. So if you look at a piano, it's a piano. It's unchanging. It's not doing anything. It has all the keys that it has forever. Keys aren't flying off and new keys aren't forming. It's just a set of keys. But from this set of keys, by playing the piano, you can create beautiful various transformations of various songs and patterns. So from an eternal piano, you can create a great variety of musical compositions and pieces. So this is the idea of that you have an eternal grounded one, a first principle, a ground of all existence that itself is unchanging, immutable, meaning it can't be muted, it can't be destroyed, it can't be negated. And this can be understood like the analogy of the piano, like I said. Not only is he the one called without a beginning and without end, because he is unbegotten. Wait, did I read this already? No, they're just repeating themselves. They're really they're driving this point home, but you can see why it's important, because they're really trying to lay down some more philosophical grounding than what you would typically find in Orthodox Christianity, like I said, where it's just like, oh, there was God, and then poof, there was the world, and then humans were bad, and then the snake, that sort of thing. This is a lot more complex, a lot more detailed, and they're trying to lay down a foundation of the system. Now, you see the difference here, though, is that they never really account for how the one can exist. They account for the existence of all other things being based on the one, which is really cool, but they can't really account for how the one exists. And you'll find this in a lot of systems. In Gnosticism, it's like, whether Sethian or Valentinianism, it's like, oh, well, we can't know the one. We can know what the one does, but we can't know how it is the way that it is, or it's unknowable. And same thing with Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, you have Ein Sof, which is the endless one, and the endless one is unknowable, ineffable, etc. And in our system, which is a knowledge system, like I already gave you a little bit of a brief example, is that we can explain the existence of a foundational principle in being rooted in a mathematically valid concept. It gets a lot more detailed than the brief example that I gave, with reality being a balance to zero and mathematically equivalent to nothingness, and therefore being a logically valid existent. It gets even deeper and has to do with the nature of reason itself and the nature of non-existence and existence, and reality being necessary for to be the way that it is, to prevent paradoxes and impossibilities. Long story short, the way that reality is the only way that reality can be, and it has to be, because if it were any other way, impossibilities and paradoxes would occur and reality would collapse and not be able to exist. So this reality we exist in is the only possible stable structure that can exist and has to exist, or else reality would be an impossible field of paradoxes, which is not possible. You can't even imagine it, because it's not a possible scenario. It's literally impossible. To fully get into it would take a long time, but you can see my point here is that in all these systems, you can't know what the one is. When we describe reality through meta-rationalism, the idea that metaphysics can be understood rationally, you can know what the one is, and we understand it as being a collective of individual minds, zetas. But that's where we get into the Neogenian system. But let's focus on this Valentinian Gnosticism idea. I just want to point out how cool this is, because this is a very philosophical unfolding of reality being based on this first underlying principle. Not only is he the one called without a beginning and without end, because he is and I just want to clarify real quick for those who might not be familiar. Most of you know this already, but what we're describing here is not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is going to come later, and we'll see the God of the Bible is a completely different being that turns out to be an ignorant being and bumbles along and creates not a great world, not a fantastic world. So I just want to make this clear. The God that we're describing right now is infinitely superior to the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible will be just one of the various emanations from this one being, and we are going to be emanations from this one being as well, meaning that we are God. We are God. And if you take a look at check out the playlist on the Gnostic video that I just did called On the Origin of the World, which is on Sethian Gnosticism, that talks about how the God of the Bible was terrified of Adam because Adam was actually a god that was more powerful than the God of the Bible. And then the God of the Bible tries to trap Adam in a body to try and confine his powers, etc. Very cool. Why has no one made a movie about this yet? Like, this would be you could make such a cool Marvel movie. Even something that was loosely based on this would be very, very cool. It has a lot of very interesting themes that I think would translate well. Anyway. So not only is he the one called without a beginning and without an end, because he is unbegotten and immortal, but just as he has no beginning and no end as he is unattainable in his greatness, inscrutable in his wisdom, incomprehensible in his power, and unfathomable in his sweetness. In the proper sense, he alone, the good, the unbegotten Father, and the complete perfect one, is the one filled with all his offspring and with every virtue and with everything of value. And he has more, that is, lack of any malice, in order that he may be discovered that whoever has anything is indebted to him, because he gives it, being himself unreachable and unwearied by that which he gives, since he is wealthy in the gifts which he bestows, and at rest in the favor which he grants. So again, just emphasizing that everything comes from this one. He is filled with his offspring. The offspring are from within him. So you have a God that the creation comes from the God's own essence, which Christianity it's always been very, very confused about, because in Christianity you have the God of the Bible that creates a world and humans. But where does, if you think about it, is the world and humans separate from God? And this is very important. If you think about the God of the Bible creates the earth and humanity. But how is this God doing it? Is this God creating something that is truly external and separate from it? But if it is truly external and separate from it, then that God is no longer infinite. Because an infinite being isn't constrained at all. But if you create something that is not you, you're no longer infinite, because there's something that isn't you. You aren't all things. If you aren't all things, if there's something that isn't you, then you aren't all things, and therefore you're not infinite. So that's a very big problem. Now, if you say, okay, well, God created from its own essence, if God created the world from its own essence, well, then that would mean everything is ultimately divine. And then ultimately, we are in some part divine and an expression of God. So Christianity is full of paradoxes and inconsistencies, but that's another one to throw into the bag. Is if God created Earth separate from itself, then God isn't infinite. If God created Earth from itself, then everything is inherently imbued with divinity, and we are expressions of God. So, but this is saying that everything comes from this God. And this is why, when I say our divine origin is from this God. We are ultimately, everything is an expression or a transformation of this God. Just like energy can take on various transformations, a piano can create all kinds of music and express itself in a variety of ways. We are all expressions and transformations of the divine, according to this system. He is of such a kind and form and great magnitude that no one else has been with him from the beginning, nor is there a place. They're really hitting home that this is the, I don't know how many times, this is the only one. There's no one else. There's nobody. He's alone. There's no one with him, no one above him, no one else that can change him. It's just him, the only one. So if you haven't gotten it by now, if you haven't figured it out, it's the only one. But I can see why they probably say it so much, is because even today, that's kind of a hard concept for people to grasp. And so when it was written, that was probably even more they probably had people coming up all the time and be like, well, who created that God? Or well, what if that God encountered another God? Or what if, and they're just trying to be like, no, hey, look, this is eternal. This is the only thing that there is. There's nothing else. Seriously. Really, really. So, he's been there from the beginning. There's no one else been there with him from the beginning. And they're also probably saying this as well, because if you read the Bible, they say us a lot. If you know, the Bible says, let's create man in our image. They say us and our quite a lot, which, again, you want to throw another inconsistency in Christianity. Why is this? Well, because the Christian religion is rooted in Judaism, which is rooted in a Canaanite religion. And the Canaanite religion was a polytheistic religion, meaning that the scripture that the Bible's based on, that's Genesis, it was a polytheistic religion. So there were multiple gods. You had El Elyon and Asherah. You had a variety of gods. And so, but of course, throughout the years, it became a henotheism, with Yahweh being the most powerful God, then a monotheism with Yahweh being the only God, and then we eventually had Christianity today, which places Yahweh as the Father of Jesus Christ. And so then you have a problem with, well, why does it say us in Genesis? And so, yeah, that's a problem. And the usual answer is like, oh, well, that must mean like Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Like God and Jesus were talking to each other. But that's dumb. it's very, very silly. So, where are we here? Okay. No one else is there from the beginning other than him, nor is there a place in which he is or from which he has come forth. Well, yeah, again, he didn't come from anywhere or into which he will go. It's not going anywhere. Nor is there a primordial form. It is the primordial form, which he uses as a model as he works. Nor is there any difficulty which accompanies him in what he does. It doesn't encounter difficulty means like external. Of course, you'll have internal difficulties, but there's no external force with which it has to combat. Nor is there any material which is at his disposal. Again, yes. See, I love this. Nor is there any material which is at his disposal from which he creates what he creates, nor any substance within him from which he begets what he begets, nor a co-worker with him, working with him on the things which he works. To say anything of this sort is ignorant. Rather, one should speak of him as good, faultless, perfect, complete, being himself the totality. So you can think of this as sort of a version of non-dualism. In philosophy, you could think of it as a monism in a certain sense. I mean, this is not really too much about ontology here. Mostly, since it's not a strictly philosophical work, you can't give it a precise label. But it's a form of non-dualism where it's basically saying, hey, again, there's just one thing, and anything that it creates from, it doesn't create from any external material. It's all coming from the one thing. It doesn't need another thing to create with it other than what it generates from itself. It's one, and if you think that it's anything else, that's ignorant. It's the perfect, complete, all of reality, all of existence, the totality. Not one of the names which are conceived or spoken, seen or grasped. By the way, I think it's very cool. I always mention H.P. Lovecraft's story of Azathoth. I did a video on that if you haven't seen it. H.P. Lovecraft was a horror writer who was an atheist, but came up with a god in his story that's actually very, very similar to the one. And in the story of H.P. Lovecraft's story where he talks about Azathoth, Azathoth is essentially this being that is the highest god, the most powerful god, the gods of all gods. Why? Because everything is the dream of Azathoth. Azathoth is the dreamer of reality. So everything is a dream. You right now are a dream character in Azathoth's realm. And so everything is the dream of Azathoth. But Azathoth isn't aware that it's dreaming. It's asleep and doesn't know that it's dreaming. So it doesn't change. It doesn't, have any interest in the affairs of humans or anything like that. It's just dreaming its dream, not knowing it's dreaming its dream. And if it were to ever wake up, all of reality would cease. And so it's interesting. And in H.P. Lovecraft's story, they talk about these beings that are like eternally playing Azathoth music to try and keep it sleeping, because if it ever wakes up, everything will stop existing. Obviously, this is fiction and horror, but it's very, very cool. I very much believe that H.P. Lovecraft was picking up on these intuitive structures of existence, even though Azathoth, or Lovecraft himself, was an atheist. So let's see. None of the names which are conceived or spoken, seen or grasped, no one of them applies to him, even though they are exceedingly glorious, magnifying, and honored. However, it is possible to utter these names for his glory and honor in accordance with the capacity of each those who give him glory. Yet, as for him and his own existence being in form, it is impossible for mind to conceive him, nor can any speech convey him, nor can any eye see him, nor can any body grasp him, because of his inscrutable greatness and incomprehensible depth, and immeasurable height, and illimitable will. So essentially, you can't say anything, nothing that you can say about this being will fully capture what it is basically what it is. Even if you're saying exceedingly glorious and honorable things about this being, nothing that you can say will grasp what it is. It's saying you can do this if you want to give it glory, but it's not going to be accurate. So it's basically saying, hey, keep this in mind. If you are praising this being and giving it all these exceedingly glorious and honorable names and attributes, it's not accurate, it's not right, it's not true. You can say it if you want. If you want to give it praise, you can do that, but it's not true. It's beyond all these concepts. It's beyond all these things. This is the nature of the unbegotten one, which does not touch anything else, nor is it joined to anything in the manner of something which is limited. Rather, he possesses the constitution without having a face or a form from which are understood through perception, whence also comes the epithet, the incomprehensible. If he is incomprehensible, then it follows that he is unknowable, that he is the one who is inconceivable by any thought, invisible by anything, ineffable by any word, untouchable by any hand. He alone is the one who himself as he is, along with his form and greatness and his magnitude. So one of the things here that's interesting to note, though, is, it talks about how it's incomprehensible, ineffable, untouchable, unknowable. The problem that arises with this, right, is that, well, this whole thing is saying a lot of things about this being. It's talking a lot about this being. And if it's truly unknowable and ineffable in every sense of the word, you really wouldn't be able to say anything about it. And they're kind of trying to get around this by just being like, hey, it's the everything. It's the all that there is. It doesn't need anything. It's the greatest thing. It's the best thing. It's an awesome thing. But you can't know the thing. There's just a little bit of a difficulty here, because if it were truly, totally, ultimately unknowable in every sense of the word, then you would just have to, couldn't say, you'd have to be, you to truly be consistent with that, you really wouldn't be able to say anything about it. So, I mean, that's not a problem from our position, because from our position, you can know this thing. But I think that, if they were to look at their thoughts logically, it would follow like, oh, okay, well, if we can understand this about the one, well, then maybe the one is knowable. If we can understand that it is the totality, that it is the root from all things form, then maybe we can understand it. But see, in their mind, it's like, okay, we get that there is this one from which all things came, but like, for them, it's like, well, but how is it that this thing is? And so for them, it's sort of just like, well, it is, and you can't know. It just is. You can't know it. It's unknowable. That's a little unsatisfying. But that's where they're coming from. And I think you could probably see why they would come from that position. But really, if you start looking at it, if you can understand these certain attributes about it, oh, well, it is a one, it is from which all things depend on, etc., you can, that should give one a hint that, oh, well, maybe I can understand how this being is. In philosophical terms, we would say self-grounding or aseity. So self-grounding means that this being has the ground for its own existence within itself, and aseity is very similar, being that it has the reason for its own existence within itself. So basically it means that the reason for its own being is contained within it and not in any external thing. It's contained within itself. So it's a self-grounding being, meaning that it contains its own ground. It contains its own reason for being within itself. It has aseity. But what is this ground? Well, this can be known. The self-grounding nature of it can be known. And I explained it a little bit earlier. It has to do with that this being can exist logically and consistently. And if it didn't exist logically and consistently, paradoxes and impossibility would occur. So it's not so much that it's just, it is because it is. And that's kind of their answer here. Well, it just is. Sort of more accurate. It's not just like it is that it is. It is because it has to be. It is because it must be. And that might seem like a subtle difference, but it's an important difference. Rather than just saying something is, well, because it is because it has to be is subtly and importantly different. Because something that has to be must be for a certain reason. And see, now you're grounded in reason, where previously you're not so much grounded. If you just go, it is because it is because it is, you're starting to. This is now you're. I mean, it's not terrible. You're just using it as an axiom, and you can start with an axiom, sure. But I think you can feel it's not terribly satisfying. There's something about it that's in the back of your mind, like, yeah, that doesn't really click though. It's like there's this puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit, and so it is that it is a problem. It is because it has to be is now grounded more so in reason, because has to do with necessity, and there's a reason for why it has to be, rather than just having being for the pure sake of being. And again, like I said, the reason why it has to do with logical consistency, paradox, and impossibility, and that it's a situation or setup or organization or a structure that must exist because it's logically possible for it to exist. It contains no errors or flaws. And if it didn't, if this logical system existed in another way or didn't exist, it would arise into impossibility and paradoxes, which are literally impossible. So, important difference to note there. Again, if you want to know more about that, take a closer look into our Neogenian system. So, anyway, we left off by it cannot be comprehended. And since he has the ability to conceive of himself, to see himself, to name himself, to comprehend himself, he alone is the one who is his own mind, his own eye, his own mouth, and his own form. And he is what he thinks, what he sees, what he speaks, what he grasps himself, the one who is inconceivable, ineffable, incomprehensible, immutable, while sustaining joyous, true delight, and restful in that which he conceives, that which he sees, that about which he speaks, and which he has as thought. He transcends all wisdom, is above all intellect, is above all glory, and is above all beauty and all sweetness and all greatness and any depth and any height. And I'm sure you could see why this is very blasphemous to Orthodox Christianity, because this being is obviously much higher than the God of the Bible. If this one who is unknowable in his nature, to whom pertains all this greatness, which I already mentioned, if out of the abundance of his sweetness he wishes to grant knowledge so that he might be known, he has the ability to do so. He has that power, which is his will. Now, whoever in silence he himself holds back, he who is the great one, who is the cause of bringing the totalities into their eternal being. It is in the proper sense that he begets himself as ineffable, since he alone is self-begotten, since he conceives of himself, and since he knows himself as he is. What is worthy of his admiration and glory and honor and praise, he produces because of the boundlessness of his greatness and unsearchability of his wisdom and immeasurability of his power and untastable sweetness. Let me see. I want to make a comment here about the God of the Bible, but let me see. Let me read just a couple more sentences, and then I want to talk about that because that's important in the context of our narrative here. He is the one who projects himself thus as generation, having glory and honor, marvelous and lovely, the one who glorifies himself, who marvels, the one who has a son, who subsists in him, who is silent concerning him, who is the ineffable one and the ineffable one, the invisible one, the incomprehensible one, the inconceivable one, in the inconceivable one. Thus he exists in him forever. The Father, in the way we mentioned earlier, in an unbegotten way, is the one in whom he knows himself, who begot him, having a thought, which is the thought of him. That is the perception of him, which is of his constitution forever. That is, however, in the proper sense, the silence and the wisdom and the grace, if it is designated properly in this way. Okay, so a couple interesting things to note here. Basically, they're saying, again, don't have to mention it again, he's the one, and inconceivable and incomprehensible, again and again and again. However, interesting to note here that he is the one who knows himself, who begot him, having a thought, which is the thought of him, that is the perception of him, which is of his constitution forever. So basically you have this idea of sort of like unfoldments of thoughts. You have the thoughts of the one that ends up becoming people having thoughts and thinking about the one, etc. So a couple things to note here. First of all, so I want to emphasize a difference between Valentinian Gnosticism and because what comes next is the generation of the Son. Okay, because you have the idea of the Father, then you're going to have the idea of the generation of the Son, which is important. But a couple things I want to note here with regard to Valentinian Gnosticism is that if you'll notice, to me, what this seems like, the difference between Sethian Gnosticism and Valentinian Gnosticism, it seems to be presenting Gnostic ideas in a way that is more palatable for Orthodox Christianity. Because if you imagine Sethian Gnosticism, oh man, that's to normal or Orthodox Christianity, it's intense. You know, you have it's just, you know, the God of the Bible is an evil, malicious being that's like basically Satan, and reality is governed by a one mind of ineffable light, and you have Jesus having Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge, and also you have a lot of extremely powerful feminine figures. Even emphasis, you know, most of the heroes in Sethian Gnosticism are very feminine, which is great. I love that. But I think you could see how, to the average Orthodox, to the average person associating with Orthodox Christianity back then, that's a lot to swallow. Like, there's a God that's just light, and our God is actually Satan and evil, and they probably had a hard time too with women taking on such a prominent role as well. So here with Valentinianism, we have a little bit more of a palatable form of Gnosticism. Unfortunately, they toned down the emphasis on women, which I don't like, but in my opinion, they probably did this to try and be more appealing to Orthodox Christianity, to try and probably subvert it. And also, you can notice here, even here where we're talking about the one, it's still very abstract and philosophical, but they're still kind of giving qualities to it, like that he has admiration, and that it's kind, and it's giving a slightly more anthropomorphic qualities to it. Like, it's the Father that has greatness and grants knowledge and things like this. They're giving it a little bit more an anthropomorphic form, where in Sethian Gnosticism, it's just the one mind of divine light that's unknowable and everything comes from it, but it doesn't have this idea of like of being kind or anything like this. It's just this underlying singular principle. And so you're giving it some more anthropomorphic qualities, which I think would be more palatable for Orthodox Christianity, because now there's this like ultimate being that they can praise if they want. Like they said, well, you can praise it if you want. It's not going to really be right, but you can. And then, of course, the idea when we get to the creation of the creator God, the demiurge, the creator God of the Bible, instead of it being an evil, malicious entity, it becomes more of just an ignorant entity, a lower God, a lesser God. So it's a little more palatable where it's like, oh, okay, well, the God of the Bible is a lesser ignorant God. It's not necessarily this evil thing. It's an ignorant thing. So we can have knowledge of the higher true God, but not necessarily have to think of this God as being super evil. So I think you can see where it's a lot more palatable for Orthodox Christianity, which I think could very possibly have been a strategy used to try and subvert Christianity. Because if you imagine, these Gnostics were very, very smart. So if you can imagine, you probably, and this is total conjecture, but I would suspect it could be true. You have the founders of Valentinian Gnosticism thinking about, hey, well, this is kind of a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Let's present it in a way where we can be more integrated into Orthodox Christianity. Because that's Valentinian Gnosticism. You know, Valentinus was the originator of it. They incorporated a lot of Orthodox Christianity into it, like rituals and themes and narratives and stories. So it was a lot more integrated into Christianity. So I think it's very possible that they could have put this together, be like, hey, this is a hard pill to swallow. Let's present it in a certain way that's more palatable for the Orthodox Christianity, so we can start moving Christianity into this other direction that's ultimately much better and much more positive. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I think that that's possible. But one of the things that I do really like about Valentinian Gnosticism is this idea that the demiurge can be saved and become a servant of the higher realms. I like that idea because while it's very satisfying in Sethian Gnosticism to be like, oh yeah, he's evil and he's destroyed and obliterated, you know, that's fun to think about in a story form. But in reality, like how reality actually works, we know that we don't live in a dualism of good and evil. Everything is just an emanation of the one and can transition from one form to another. So in this case, you have the demiurge realizing, oh, I'm a creator, a being that can create, but I am not actually the one true God, so I shouldn't be acting like a dick, like I have been. So I do like that idea. We're going to explore those themes a lot more, and we'll also probably, like I said, be exploring these Valentinian rituals, because some of them are controversial. Like you had the one with the bridal, where we looked up earlier in the chat, which regards to the bridal chamber, which may or may not have involved sexual elements to it, when you had the union of the divine masculine and feminine into a unity. Anyway, a lot of really interesting things to talk about. But we are going to continue to discuss the further emanations of this being as the Son and the Church, and the rest of this has to do with the emanations of all reality forming a perfect realm. And then, of course, from this perfect realm, it describes how these realms operate, what these realms are composed of, what sort of beings inhabit these realms. And then you end up having the birth of the creator God and the birth of the material world. And so we're going to take a look at it from a Valentinian perspective, which is very interesting, very intriguing. I hope you enjoy it. But there's a lot more videos that I've done. Check them out on my channel. Check out playlists that I have done. There will probably be a playlist on this video So check it out. And also, as always, if you enjoy my work, hey, consider supporting on Patreon. It is the best way to support my work. And you get access to all of our members-only videos. We have a new members-only video every single week. And you can access that by supporting on any tier on Patreon or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. And, as always, hey, don't feel obligated to support monetarily. Only do so if you want to. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking and subscribing and sharing. But I want to shout out everyone who does support. Thank you so much. Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Enki, Nucelina, Paul Rogers III, Eric Fire, Massam, Christopher Smith, and everyone else. Thank you very much.